let me immediately introduce Dr. Victor Stenger. Dr. Stenger is Emeritus Professor of Physics and Astronomy at the University of Hawaii, as you've already seen from the photo, and Adjunct Professor of Philosophy at the University of Colorado. His research career helped establish the properties of strange particles, quarks, gluons, and neutrinos, and helped pioneer the emerging fields of very high energy gamma ray and neutrino astronomy. He is the author of a number of popular science books, including Has Science Found God?, The Comprehensible Cosmos, Timeless Reality, The Unconscious Quantum, Not by Design, and of course the New York Times bestseller, his most recent book, God, the Failed Hypotheses. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Stenger.
So let me first tell you what the new atheism is, how I would define the new atheism. Atheists would have no objection if religious activities were confined to home, church, mosque. But when believers come outside of their churches to seek to impose their beliefs on the rest of us, then we have a right to object. When they want those beliefs taught in public schools, even though they contradict well-established science or other academic disciplines, then we have a right to object. When the application of these beliefs to public policy result in the suffering and deaths of millions of people, as they have, we have a right to object. Religious ideas seem to get a free ride. They're not questioned as much as ideas in other fields of thought. And we really insist that they should be, that we should question any religious idea, just like we would question any scientific idea. They should be subject to the same kind of critical analysis. Now, yesterday we heard the speakers in the debate claim that their faith is based on evidence. Well, I'm going to define faith as belief in the absence of evidence. So if they have evidence, which I would love to see, then that's not a belief anymore, not faith anymore, but it's a belief. It's a belief like a scientific belief. I mean, religious faith is belief in the absence of evidence. Scientific belief is not a faith. It's belief in the presence of evidence. So once you have the evidence, then it's no longer a matter of faith. And so the new atheism, again, is a movement that was started with Sam Harris's book, The End of Faith, suggesting that we should work to eliminate faith because faith is quite injurious to both individuals and to society. So let me show you the four books that. This is what is usually defined as the new atheism, at least in the literature and the newspapers and journals. There were, in the period 2004 to 2007, there were these 6 books that came out by 5 different authors, and usually you just hear the 4 horsemen, but I put myself in there as kind of the stable boy, because my book down there that you see in the middle and bottom was God, the Failed Hypothesis, was also a New York Times bestseller, as were these. In fact, I sold as many books as Daniel Dennett, so it should have been, really should have been listed. God hypothesis is not about the nature of God. It's about the fact that the God that most people worship should have observable effects. If such a God existed, we would know about it. And I totally refute the idea that science has nothing to say about God. As you'll see from my arguments, that if God existed, science could have detected that God. And there have been experimental tests to see if that God exists. For example, the God that most people worship is a God that answers prayers. There have been several very good, well-controlled experiments by people from reputable universities like Harvard, Duke, the Mayo Clinic, in an attempt to study the efficacy of prayer. These experiments, incidentally, were not done by skeptics. All the people working on these experiments were, in fact, believers. They would like to have found evidence for God, and they could have found evidence for God. And who then, my friends here, would be the first people to shout, hooray, we have proven that God exists, if they had found evidence. But they didn't. Anyway, I have another interesting announcement to make. Notice that atheists are no longer the most despised group in America. We dropped down to number 2. And you know what number one group is? The Tea Party.
Let me list a set of attributes that are traditionally associated with the God of the monotheistic religions, but particularly Christianity. He's the creator of the universe. He's immaterial and transcendent. He's all-powerful, all-knowing, all-good, and indeed perfect in every way. Furthermore, God is a person. He loves humans and wishes us to know him. He's forgiving and merciful. Speaks to humans, revealing truths to us that we would not otherwise know. And he answers prayers as he sees fit and performs miracles violating natural laws. Now, many philosophers have argued that the traditional attributes of God are logically incompatible. Here are just a few of these. Let's consider perfect versus creator. If God is perfect, then he has no needs or wants. This is incompatible with the notion that God created the universe for some divine purpose. Divine purpose implies that God wants something he doesn't already have, which makes him imperfect. Transcendent versus omnipresent. How can a God beyond space and time be at the same time everywhere in space and time? Just versus merciful. To be just means to treat a person exactly as they deserve. To be merciful means to treat a person better than they deserve. You can't do both. Immaterial versus personal. To be a person is to have a material body, to have a brain, to have a mouth that you speak with, and so on. So God, with these and many of the other attributes that are traditionally assigned to him, does not exist. Now, the God of monotheism also has attributes that are inconsistent with what we know about the world. For example, an all-powerful, all-knowing God, who also has the attribute of wanting all humans to know and love him, is inconsistent with the fact that there are non-believers in the world. Perhaps the most ancient and strongest of the arguments for God's non-existence is the problem of evil. An all-good, all-powerful, all-knowing God is simply inconsistent with the fact of evil and gratuitous suffering in the world.
By now, with billions of people praying every day throughout the world for thousands of years, you think one of the prayers would have been answered by now in a way that could be tested, not just on the basis of anecdotal evidence or stories and so on, but actual scientific justification. Another way that God might have been detected is by revelation. God is supposed to reveal truths to humans. Well, that's a perfectly testable scientific hypothesis, because if God revealed truths, there should have been some point in history where somebody said something that could be tested scientifically, not by a prediction that was in the Bible that was later answered in the Bible, but by some phenomenon that the person couldn't possibly have known about, and later turns out to be true. Could be tested to be something simple like the date of the next Los Angeles earthquake, or something more complex. But that's perfectly testable. And so all throughout the phenomenal world, we can find examples of if God existed, where there should have been evidence. There should have been evidence for design in the universe. You know, a lot of people claim they think they see design in the universe. But a scientist looking at the universe sees absolutely no sign of design. It looks totally undesigned. It looks like it should look if God does not exist. And this includes biology, this includes physics, this includes cosmology, and so on. We have perfectly workable scenarios for how the universe could have come about naturally. Not everybody necessarily agrees on them, but the point is that you can't use the existence of the universe itself as a God in the gaps argument, because we have plausible ways in which the universe could have come from nothing, how the laws of physics might have come from nothing, and so on.
And so Victor, don't give up on yourself too quickly.
Yeah. I should mention that I grew up in this area, and when I was about 15, my mother took me to the Hayden Planetarium. It was around 1950 or something like that, and that really got me into science. So Neil, you did a great job. But yeah, you're right, and I have to admit that there's something happening in the process. I'm just claiming that the people who are coming out are still not thinking critically the way we want. Why is it that so many of them, for example, still will come out of the science education and still believe in religion? I mean, it's just, is there when you walk into a church, is there a place there where you leave your brains, as deposit brains here? And it's something I think we've all have to puzzle about. The God of the gaps argument has always been used to provide a place for God. The idea is that if science can't explain something, then maybe we need to reintroduce God. That's been historically the reason why people even talked about God. God was always an explanation for the things they didn't understand. Now, I don't claim that we understand everything, but we can give a plausible explanation for every question of this sort. Rather than the gaps increasing, as he was urging, I claim that the gaps have pretty much disappeared. Not that, again, we can explain everything, but we have a plausible explanation, and that's why I wanted to give some detail into that scenario for the natural origin of the universe. Also give you some idea of how the laws of nature could come about. So I think that the fact that God is not needed, we have a natural explanation for the universe, for everything that we know. In no place do we have to put God into the picture. So there's absolutely no reason to even introduce the concept of God. It's a meaningless concept. It has not only no evidence, there's no basis for it. And the universe looks just like it should look if there is no God.